What's going on, guys? Sean Nalawani, SeanNal.com, RealScienceAthletics.com, and in this video, I'm going to be going over 20 common bodybuilding and fitness myths that have been circulating around for years and giving you the real truth behind these myths to help you save time and effort and keep your program as effective and efficient as possible. Now, this is going to be more of a rapid fire style. I'll just be quickly going over each one with a brief explanation, and that way I can cover a larger number of points here, but without the video dragging on for too long. Before I dive into it, if you're new to the channel here and you find this advice helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below to stay in the loop on future videos. And also make sure to follow me over on Instagram as well. I post there every single day with additional training, nutrition, supplementation, and mindset advice that you'll definitely get a lot of value from. It's at Sean_Nalawani. That's where you'll find me when I'm not here on the YouTube channel. Okay, let's get started. Bodybuilding myth number 1 is the idea that you need to consume a protein shake or a high protein meal as quickly as possible following your workout in order to take advantage of the anabolic window. The reality here is that as long as you consume some sort of pre-workout meal within a couple hours of your session, then the same amino acids from that meal are still going to be available to your body even after your workout is over, since protein digestion is a gradual process and doesn't happen all at once. And so immediately consuming another post-workout meal is not some sort of critical make or break nutrition strategy that you have to follow. Not only that, but the anabolic window where your muscles will be more sensitive to nutrient uptake, that time frame lasts a lot longer than just 30 minutes or 1 hour. It actually spans for quite a few hours post-workout, up to as much as 6 hours or more. So don't overthink this. Get some protein in within a couple hours of your workout, and ideally within a couple hours after, and you'll be fine. And even if you wait slightly longer, it's not going to be a huge deal. The most important factor by far is just that you get in enough total protein for the day as a whole, and about 0.8 grams per pound of body weight is a good figure to aim for. Bodybuilding myth number 2 is that you must eat big to get big. Yes, if you're in a focused bulking phase and you want to fully maximize muscle growth and strength gains, then you should be eating in a calorie surplus, but at the same time, it's very important to remember that your body can only make use of a relatively small daily surplus for the purpose of building lean muscle, and any calories you take in beyond that point will just be stored as fat. So about 200 to 300 calories above maintenance is all you need to optimize your gains, and just stuffing your face with more and more food and weight gainer shakes and things like that, and trying to force feed muscle growth, that's actually going to be counterproductive to your physique in the long run, because it won't help you gain muscle any faster, but it will cause you to put on excessive body fat that you'll then have to waste unnecessary time and effort dieting off later on. Bodybuilding myth number 3 is the idea that there are certain quote-unquote muscle-building foods that you must eat in order to maximize your results. The truth here is that proper nutrition is all about the big picture, and it's about the total calories, the total macros, the micros, and the fiber that you eat for the day as a whole from a combination of everything that you eat. There are certain foods that are generally going to be more calorie and macro friendly, but there are no individual foods that you must eat or that are going to have some sort of special muscle building effect on their own in isolation. So if there are certain foods you really don't enjoy, then there's no reason to force yourself to eat them, and you'll be much better off by simply basing your diet around the foods you most prefer, but that still allow you to hit your total nutritional needs for the day. Not only will that just make your day-to-day diet more enjoyable in general, but it will also maximize the chances that you'll stick with it over the long run. Bodybuilding myth number 4 is that there are certain specific exercises you must perform in order to build muscle effectively. Okay, yes, there are certain movement patterns that you should ideally be including in order to create an optimal and properly balanced program, such as, a horizontal press for the chest, or a vertical pull for the lats, or a hip hinge for the hamstrings. But there are no individual variations of those movement patterns that are an absolute must in order for you to gain significant muscle. Okay, as long as a given exercise safely places the targeted muscle under tension and allows for consistent progressive overload over time, then it will ultimately be an effective means of building muscle. So that could mean a barbell bench press, or a dumbbell press, or even a machine press, or it could mean an overhand pull-up, or a lat pull-down, or a hammer pull-down, etc. So focus more on hitting the proper movement patterns first and foremost, and then select the specific exercise variations within those movement patterns that feel best for you in terms of maximizing muscle activation and minimizing joint stress. Bodybuilding myth number 5 is that cardio burns muscle. So it is true that performing an excessive amount of cardio can negatively impact your gains by interfering with weight training, recovery, and performance. However, a moderate amount of cardio is completely fine. It's not going to cause you to lose muscle, and including some form of cardiovascular exercise during the week is something that I recommend everyone do just for the overall physical and mental health benefits that it provides. Just make sure that you don't perform your cardio immediately pre-workout because you don't want to pre-fatigue yourself right before weight training. And I'd say to ideally limit it to 2 to 3 sessions per week to start, only increasing it later on if you really need to. And if you are performing higher volumes of cardio, then make sure that you increase your calorie intake to compensate for what you're burning, to make sure that you're staying in a net calorie surplus if bulking is your primary goal. Bodybuilding myth number 6 is that training each muscle only once per week is not an effective way to build muscle. It is true that training each muscle only once per week likely won't be optimal for building muscle at the very fastest rate in comparison to hitting it, say, 1.5 or 2 times a week. And that's because your muscles don't actually require a full week in order to completely recover. But you most definitely can still make significant gains over the long term with a once per week frequency, as long as the total volume and intensity is sufficient for the week as a whole. Okay, keep in mind that just because something isn't optimal doesn't mean that it's ineffective. And plenty of lifters out there make great gains on bro split body part routines. And I went through phases in the past where I trained that way as well with good results. Hitting each muscle once a week will still get you to the same end goal if you're consistently achieving progressive overload, but it will likely just take a bit longer to get there in comparison to something like a full body routine or upper lower or legs push pull, where the frequency per muscle is a bit higher per week. Bodybuilding myth number 7 is that fasted cardio increases fat loss in comparison to fed cardio. So this myth has been pretty thoroughly debunked over the years, and whether you perform fasted cardio or fed cardio, it's not going to have any noticeable impact on your bottom line fat loss, assuming your total calorie intake versus your total calorie expenditure for the day as a whole stays the same. Fasted cardio does increase lipolysis, which is the amount of fat that gets broken down, but it doesn't actually increase fat oxidation, which is the amount of fat that actually gets burned for energy. And in the end, the fatty acids that aren't used for fuel are just restored as body fat. So if you prefer fasted cardio for whatever reason, then that's totally fine, go ahead. But ultimately, your pre-cardio nutrition strategy should just be based on personal preference in terms of what feels best for you. When it comes to fat loss, don't obsess over what happens over these short windows of 30 minutes or an hour. What really matters is that you're maintaining a net calorie deficit for the overall day and week as a whole. Bodybuilding myth number 8 is that delayed onset muscle soreness is an indicator of having had a successful workout. So muscle soreness does indicate that some form of damage has occurred within the tissue, but it doesn't necessarily indicate that that damage will specifically lead to increases in muscle size and strength. Keep in mind that any form of repetitive stress can make your muscle sore, whether it's an intense cardio session or even something completely unrelated to regular exercise. And as a beginner, you'll tend to get very sore after your workouts, and then over time, as your body gradually adapts to weight training, that soreness is gradually going to subside as well. At the end of the day, the primary factor for gauging the success of your workouts is progressive overload, meaning that your performance in the gym is steadily increasing over time. And the main metric to pay attention to, especially for beginner to intermediate lifters, is simply the amount of weight lifted and the reps performed for each exercise. As long as you're consistently getting stronger in the gym and putting up better numbers from week to week and month to month while maintaining proper form, then that's what truly matters, regardless of how sore or not sore you felt in the days after your session. Bodybuilding myth number 9 is that weight training stunts growth. So unless we're talking about a rare situation where you literally had a freak accident in the gym and you broke a bone and damaged an actual growth plate, there's no evidence that a properly executed weight training plan stunts growth in any way. And in terms of sudden, serious injuries, weight training itself is actually very safe, and it's even safer in comparison to a lot of other common activities that teens and younger kids participate in, like sports or outdoor activities. So assuming you grew up with adequate nutrition, height is really just a matter of genetics when it all comes down to it. Bodybuilding myth number 10 is that eating smaller meals more frequently throughout the day increases metabolic rate in comparison to larger meals eaten less frequently. In reality, when total calories are equated for the day as a whole, the specific way that you distribute those meals is not going to have any significant impact on overall fat loss, whether it's 6 small meals, 4 medium-sized meals, or 2 larger meals. Okay, resting metabolic rate doesn't change in response to meal frequency, and neither does the total daily thermic effect of the food you eat. And so when it comes to fat loss, your best bet is to just lay your meals out during the day in whatever way controls your appetite most effectively and is most sustainable and enjoyable for you over the long term. Bodybuilding myth number 11 is that eating in the later evening hours will lead to increased fat storage. So this ties in with the last point, but again, When it comes to fat loss, total calories consumed versus total calories expended for the entire day as a whole is what truly matters, not the specific timing of when those calories are ingested or burned. Consuming a higher percentage of calories in the evening would produce a greater amount of immediate fat storage at that specific time, but it would still balance out overall since your body would have burned a greater amount of fat earlier on in the day when the calories were lower, as well as during the following morning and afternoon. You can definitely cut back on your food intake in the later hours if you find it more comfortable on your stomach, since eating a very large meal right up close to bedtime can potentially interfere with sleep quality, but it won't make any difference when it comes to your bottom line body fat levels. Bodybuilding myth number 12 is that squats and deadlifts increase testosterone levels, which then causes you to gain more muscle throughout your entire body as a result. It is true that heavier compound exercises produce a larger increase in testosterone in comparison to smaller isolation lifts. However, it's important to understand that simply increasing testosterone levels in and of itself doesn't automatically mean that those increases are going to translate to more muscle growth. And that's because for increases in testosterone to have any measurable impact on hypertrophy, those levels have to be elevated by a very large percentage and then sustained over a prolonged period of time. And resistance training, even if it is a big heavy compound movement like a squat or a deadlift, isn't going to produce a large enough increase in testosterone in order for that to happen. So while squats and deadlifts are definitely great muscle building exercises that allow you to move a lot of weight and target multiple muscle groups, they don't produce added total body gains specifically as a result of increasing testosterone. Bodybuilding myth number 13 is that low reps should be used for increasing muscle size, while high reps should be used for increasing muscle definition. So this is a really old and outdated myth, but even in 2019, I still see trainers and coaches promoting this idea. The truth here is that at the end of the day, the only thing you can do to your muscles is make them bigger or smaller overall. But there's no special rep range or training technique that's going to somehow tone or define your muscles, since it's not possible to spot reduce fat from specific areas of your body. Muscle definition is simply a product of building up your total levels of muscle mass and then lowering your overall body fat percentage to make the muscles more visible. So the only real purpose of weight training itself is to maximize muscle hypertrophy, which can be done using a wide variety of different rep ranges. And then diet and cardio is what you'll use to take care of the fat loss aspect in order to bring out more visible definition as fat gets broken down from your entire body as a whole. Bodybuilding myth number 14 is that BCAAs are an effective supplement for preventing muscle breakdown and increasing protein synthesis. Now, there are tons of different supplements I could have chosen here, but I went with branched chain amino acids since they are the top selling supplement on the list of supplements that don't actually do anything for you. The bottom line is that if you're consuming adequate protein for the day as a whole, which is pretty easy to do, around 0.8 grams per pound of body weight is enough, you'll already be getting all of the BCAAs that you need in order to maximize muscle growth. And dumping 5, 10, 20 extra grams on top of that isn't going to have any added benefit. This has been shown over and over in the research, yet people still continue to buy them and placebo themselves into thinking that BCAAs are helping when they really aren't. And when it comes to fasted training, even then, BCAAs are not going to be helpful because you still need the full spectrum of amino acids present if you want to effectively halt muscle breakdown. And so an essential amino acid blend would actually be the better choice there, if anything. A regular whole food protein like a scoop of whey would be even better. You technically wouldn't be truly fasted at that point, but like we talked about earlier, there aren't any specific benefits to fasted training anyway. And also keep in mind that BCAAs and essential amino acids also contain calories as well. And so if you're planning to use either of those for fasted training, you might as well just use whey instead, because 15 grams of whey, for example, contains about the same total calories as 10 grams of BCAAs. Bodybuilding myth number 15 is that intermittent fasting is superior for fat loss in comparison to regular continuous calorie restriction. Intermittent fasting is a perfectly viable way of structuring your diet if you enjoy it and if you find it easier to stick to, but when total calories for the day as a whole are the same, intermittent fasting doesn't have any special fat burning benefits related to growth hormone or insulin or any of these other factors that IF promoters try to claim. Intermittent fasting can be really effective for some people simply because when you skip breakfast and you restrict your eating window down to only 8 hours or fewer, you just tend to eat fewer calories for the day as a whole. And we know that a calorie deficit is the primary driver of fat loss when it all comes down to it. So if intermittent fasting helps you maintain a calorie deficit more easily, then that's great, go right ahead. It's definitely something you can experiment with. But if you prefer eating regularly spaced out meals throughout the day, then that's fine too. And switching to IF from that approach isn't going to magically improve your results. Bodybuilding myth number 16 is the idea that you need to constantly switch up your workouts in order to shock or confuse your muscles into new growth. So not only is the idea of muscle confusion a myth in the first place, since your muscles don't have a mind of their own and they're just responding to the direct tension and volume that you're subjecting them to, but constantly switching around your workouts will actually be directly counterproductive to your gains over the long term. And that's because when you're always performing different exercises, different rep ranges, training different muscles on different days, it becomes much harder to accurately track progressive overload, which is the most important factor in your entire training program by far. Not only that, but it also prevents you from becoming highly skilled at any one particular set of lifts and fully maximizing their effectiveness, since you're constantly bouncing around between different exercises. So a much better approach, one that can easily make the difference between long-term success and failure, is to have a preset, concrete workout plan in place for a consistent training cycle and to maximize your strength gains on that one plan before you go ahead and switch over to something else. Bodybuilding myth number 17 is that low-carb diets are inherently superior for fat loss. So it is true that protein has a higher thermic effect in comparison to carbs and fat, and so if you're currently following a high carb, low protein diet, and you then reduce the carbs and up the protein, you technically will burn more calories through digestion, but the difference here likely wouldn't be too significant. And in most cases, the real reason why some people do see positive results when they switch over to a low carb diet is simply because when you restrict your carb intake, you end up consuming fewer calories in total, since like any macronutrient, carbs contain calories. So if you take a person who regularly consumes high amounts of calorically dense, refined carbohydrates like muffins and bagels, pastries, granola bars, sugary drinks, and things like that, which many people do, and then they replace those types of foods with lean protein and vegetables, it's no surprise that the weight finally starts falling off. And in addition, if they were consuming very low protein before that and then they increase it, the higher protein will also lead to better appetite control. So if you prefer a lower carb approach for whatever reason and you feel physically and mentally fine on it, then that's no problem. But when total calories are equated and assuming you're hitting your protein minimum for the day, there isn't going to be any significant fat burning difference in comparison to a moderate to higher carb intake. And most people will do better in terms of overall dietary adherence and training performance when they don't actively restrict their carb intake down to really low levels. Bodybuilding myth number 18 is that you must avoid alcohol if you want to gain muscle and lose fat effectively. Now, there's no question that excessive alcohol consumption is a bad idea and will be counterproductive to your progress. It's a source of empty liquid calories that can really add up if you aren't careful. And if you're drinking to the point of being hungover, then that can negatively impact your training performance, your motivation, your overall productivity, etc. But as with most things in life, the devil is in the dosage, context matters. And the reality is that if your training and your nutrition stays otherwise on point in the overall picture, then going out with your friends and having a few drinks here and there in moderation will be fine, and it won't detract from your overall results. It won't significantly impact testosterone levels or lower protein synthesis or inhibit recovery like a lot of people claim, so long as you aren't going overboard. Just make sure to do it responsibly. A weekly average of around 1 to 2 standard drinks per day for a male will be fine, and about half that amount for females. Take the calories into account, rehydrate yourself, and if you find that it is noticeably interfering with your overall fitness plan, then you do need to have the self-awareness and the discipline to cut back. But if you are able to keep things in moderation, then alcohol is not something that you necessarily have to cut out completely in order to build muscle and lose fat effectively. Bodybuilding myth number 19 is that performing direct ab exercises like crunches and leg raises is the key to getting a six-pack. Yes, training your abs for hypertrophy definitely helps out with this because it'll create more visible separation between the ab muscles and cause them to pop out more noticeably. However, keep in mind that it doesn't matter how well developed your abs are if your body fat percentage is too high in order for them to be visible in the first place. Ab exercises only target the abdominal muscles underneath the fat, but they have no effect on the actual fat stores in and around your midsection area. So yes, train your abs directly in the gym. It definitely will improve the look of your midsection and allow your abs to be more visible even at a slightly higher body fat. But the main limiting factor when it comes to getting a clearly defined six-pack is having a low enough body fat percentage. And that's achieved primarily through your diet rather than through what you do in the weight room. And finally, bodybuilding myth number 20, which is that you can't gain muscle effectively on a vegan diet. Now, I'm not personally vegan, but for those out there who are vegan or who are thinking about trying out a vegan lifestyle, the truth is that you can still gain muscle mass and strength just as effectively as an omnivore can, as long as you're getting in the proper total calories per day, along with sufficient protein and fat. Remember that proper nutrition is ultimately an overall numbers game rather than being about individual food sources. And as long as you put in the time and effort to structure your diet correctly and find vegan food sources that allow you to meet your required numbers on a consistent basis, then there shouldn't be any issue. The only thing that I would suggest is that because plant-based protein sources do have a lower absorption rate overall in comparison to animal sources, and will also be lacking in at least one of the 9 essential amino acids, I'd recommend going slightly higher on total protein for the day. So rather than the typical 0.8 gram per pound of body weight figure that I normally give, I'd bump that up a bit closer to 0.9 to 1 gram, and also try to get in a variety of different sources to ensure that all of your individual amino acid needs are being fully met. So there you have it, guys, 20 common bodybuilding myths debunked. Hope you found this information helpful. If you did enjoy the video and you want to learn how to tie all this information together in terms of a fully structured, step-by-step plan for building muscle and losing fat in the most efficient way possible, then make sure to take my physique quiz over at quiz.seannall.com, because that'll get you started on the proper training and the proper nutrition plan that you need based on your individual goals, body type, and experience level. You can click at the top of the screen for that, or use the link in the description box below. When it comes to supplementation, you can also visit realscienceathletics.com to check out my research-backed, clinically dosed formulas that I personally created to make sure your program is fully streamlined and set up for the very best results. Link for that is also in the description. And as always, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already in order to stay up to date on future videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.